My interviewee practices a combination of religions, Kashmir Shaivism and Vajrayana. Kashmir Shaivism is a sect of Hinduism, and Vajrayana is a sect of Tibetan Buddhism. Kashmir Shaivism is the belief that worships Shiva as the supreme reality. The belief is that through intense meditation on Shiva as the supreme reality, the meditator will achieve liberation or moksha and will be able to stop being reincarnated and enter a state of eternal bliss. Vajrayana is a form of tantric Buddhism that believes through personal work and dealing with inner experiences, you are able to achieve enlightenment as the Buddha experienced. An aspect of this belief is that through accepting that opposite principles are actually the same and could not exist without each other, enlightenment can be achieved. Mandalas and mantras are used as an aid for focus and meditation and to keep the mind from going astray into a fictional reality. My interviewee, Hannah, calls herself a Buddhist yogi because she practices ideas from both Buddhism and Hinduism. She doesn't completely identify with any one religion, but she has deep connections in both Shaivism because of her yoga practice and Vajrayana because of her meditation practice. Both of these religions are considered tantric, or an interweaving of traditions and teachings as threads into a text, technique, or practice. Do you want to just talk a little bit about where you live and what your meditation practice is like and what kind of things you all do together as a community?
Sure. So I live in a yoga ashram, which the easiest way to describe it is it's like a yoga and meditation focused living co-op. That's kind of like the sanitized, like easy to grasp notion. But it's a spiritual community. It's founded upon a lineage of teachers and traditional practices that come from Kashmir Shaivism, which is a sect of Buddhism, a sect of Hinduism, and Tibetan Buddhism in the Vajrayana tradition, which is obviously a part of Buddhism. So the teachings and the practices that we do here stem from those traditions and have been passed down through a lineage of teachers dating back to like the late 1800s was when the root guru in our lineage was born. So root being that's the beginning of this lineage of teachers and teachings. And there's 4 total. So Swami Nityananda, Swami Muktananda, Swami Rudrananda, and Swami Shambhavananda, who is our living teacher, the founder of the ashram where I live, and 2 others, another one in Colorado, and then one in Kona, Hawaii. Every morning do a meditation practice and chanting practice. Really, it's like half and half. So starts with a 45-minute chanting practice in Sanskrit, and then there's some other like shorter chants that we do, and then so that all totals about an hour, and then a half an hour of just silent meditation practice. So that's 7 days a week, starting at 5:30, so 5:30 to 7 every day. Regardless, everybody does a day of seva. Seva translates as selfless service. It's a Sanskrit word, and it's really about giving back, contributing to the community that we all benefit from.
And what do you do on the Seva days?
I do a combination of things. It's mostly cooking and shopping right now. Like I do the shop for the whole week. And then
That's a big task.
What's that? Yeah.
Yes, because how many people live there?
Right now, there's 8. Yeah, 8 full time. So yeah, I cook one meal for everybody to like reheat throughout the week. Do the shop, clean one of the bathrooms here, vacuum the upstairs hallway. Just basic stuff. Just keep helping take care of the property. I find little little projects, little deep cleaning projects or whatever else to fill in the time. But yeah, between the shop and the cooking, that takes up the majority of my day. And that's kind of everybody who becomes a part of the community, or at least who ends up living in the ashram. For the most part, we kind of go through the work started as the work study program. It's usually like a couple months long, and it's a full immersion into the yogic lifestyle, waking up, doing the practice, service, working every day, like 6 days a week. So it's like a pretty rigorous schedule of living in a community, contributing and cultivating a spiritual life. I loved yoga, and I knew I was very interested in spirituality, and just kind of found myself there and had an immediate and profound connection and didn't want to leave.
When you have like questions about your spiritual path or about like the religious practices, who do you go to? Like, who's your like clergy person that you talk to?
Yeah, so there's a number of people. So in I believe this comes from the Indian/Hindu tradition, but an acharya it's another Sanskrit word, but acharya basically just translates as teacher, and I think specifically in the like meditation domain. So there are a handful of acharyas in our meditation community who are people who've usually been practicing for a long time. There's not like a number on it, like you have to have been practicing this many years, but usually it's about 5 years, or at least 5 years of practice before really like being somebody that other people go to for questions about their meditation practice. And then the founder of the ashram, Babaji Shambhavananda, of course, is like the person everybody wants to ask their question to, because he's got the most experience. Really, he's been meditating for 50 plus years. He's 70 now, and started his meditation practice, met his teacher and started his practice when he was 22, and has been meditating multiple hours a day ever since. So that's the person I want to ask my questions to, and that he is the person who usually does the question and answer session on our Monday night community night program, and sometimes other people will fill in for him.
Do you call yourself Hindu now? Is that like how you would explain?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't call myself necessarily Hindu or Buddhist. I call myself a Buddhist yogi, because it's kind of like a combination, because we do practices that are from the Hindu tradition and we do practices that are from the Buddhist tradition, which really are they've diversified into Hindu and Buddhism, but they have the same roots, which is really interesting, because Buddha actually came from India. Buddha was born in India, and brought his teachings to further East Asia. So no, I don't completely identify with any one religion. I think I have deep connections in both Hindu traditions, or Shaivite traditions, and Kashmir Shaivism is the sect of Hinduism that our teachings are founded upon. But Hinduism is actually really just yoga. So yoga is like the ancient tradition, practices, and spirituality of India. The British people basically came along and assigned this idea of a religion, basically called them Hindus, the people that they found along the Indus River Valley practicing all these weird practices. They basically just gave them a label and called them Hindus. But prior to that, they didn't really have a concept of like religion, or like a group of people practicing a religion and identifying with that. That was just their way of life. So I have a weird feeling. I feel weird using the word Hinduism, because I feel like that's such a Western interpretation and like a modern interpretation of what these practices, where these practices stem from, which really is the ancient practice of yoga.
What do you think happens when we die? It's a big question.
Well, I've got an answer.
Okay, cool. Let's hear it.
I believe that our soul exits our body. And so part of my belief comes from these traditions and this philosophical background and foundation that I have as part of learning these practices and really being steeped in these traditions for a long period of time. But it's also like what resonates very deeply with me. But what I'm going to tell you, I believe happens when we die, comes from a specific text called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Mm-hmm. So I believe that our soul exits our body and we go into another dimension and go through various levels and tests, like kind of within our psyche, within our soul. Like it's very much specific to our karma, to our psychological, mental, emotional, physical, energetic makeup that we have carried with us through many lifetimes. But that basically we get shown almost as if like in a movie, but like a virtual reality, almost like it's like a very visceral experience of basically seeing and fighting all your demons, like being confronted with all of the things in this lifetime that you just exited, but also previous lifetimes that have been challenges for you, that have been, your biggest lessons in life, or your biggest tendencies, or your biggest patterns, like essentially being tested on those things of, like, what did you learn? Is like, can you get through this challenge that has been a challenge for you in previous lifetimes? So kind of like an encapsulated version of a lifetime of like basically witnessing all of your karma, experiencing it, living it, but in a more intense, like distilled sort of way. So it's called the Bardo, this place that you go to like fight your demons. And it's similar to like the Christian version of a purgatory, where it's like kind of in between. So the Bardo is, so you go to the Bardo for 59 days, I believe it is. And that's really like, yeah, as far as the specifics beyond that, like, I don't really know. I'm curious to know what's happening up in the Bardo, but I don't want to know very soon.
No, you'll find out when the time is
find out eventually. But yeah, basically then after Bardo, you can choose what your next incarnation is going to be. So like you can basically like see families that you could potentially be reborn into and like basically get a decision.
Cool.
Or if you have done enough spiritual work and are like enlightened by the time you die, or very close to that, then, and you go through the Bardo levels in a positive way, you essentially can ascend to a higher dimension, a higher reality, and essentially graduate from the human experience and go somewhere better, to like a heaven-like realm.
What has your experience been when you've kind of told other people about where you're living? You've voiced to me that you've experienced some judgment surrounding it. But I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about like your experience interacting with other people in terms of your religious and
yeah,
spiritual
I don't usually actually tell people. I don't even tell like necessarily acquaintances or people I work with, or like, satellite friends. Like I really only tell people who are close friends, partly because it's just a whole big long thing to explain, and most people are not going to get it. Like I think that probably a lot of people are going to have ideas or judgments about it, and it's, for me, it's more so just that I don't I just don't like want to explain it every single time, because everybody it's like where I live. Partly it's also where I live, so there's some privacy around that too. And it is like a somewhat public space, so it can easily be found on, the internet. So
Right.
partly privacy, partly I just don't really want to waste my breath like explaining what it is and what we do here to somebody who, their eyes are just going to glaze over, or most people already have ideas about spiritual communities. I think a lot of people are open-minded around that thing, are super curious, and just innocently like want to know, like, what do you do there? But I think more often than not, like, people really aren't that interested, don't care that much, or they're just going to have judgments about it. Especially a sensitive time around gurus, around teachers, just because there are so many instances, and have been so many instances, of spiritual communities, just having so much corruption, especially of the sexual nature. And I think that's very fair. I think it's, wise to be skeptical, because there is a lot of, just yucky shit happening in a lot of spiritual communities. So I think it's very valid. But that's not what's going on here. So it's like, it's definitely a tricky subject. It's a tricky thing to bring up, because I know that people rightfully do have a lot of, doubt and concern about spiritual communities and spiritual teachers. So yeah, in general, it's just like easier to just keep it simple. People don't, it's a big part of who I am, but it's also a very personal part of who I am. So it's not something I feel like I need to share with just anybody. It's something that people who are, in my life and who are close to me, I do share and talk about, but yeah, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. And
Yeah.
if people, want to have judgments, then so be it. In some ways, I don't blame them. I just, I'm just here and doing what I'm doing and loving it. And everything that I've ever experienced in this community has been really positive, and nothing weird, nothing sexual, nothing taking advantage of anyone in any way. It's actually quite the opposite. Yeah.
Do you pray to or meditate on like one of the gurus, or do you meditate on like something else entirely? Like, what are you up to?
Yeah. Yeah. Both. And so yeah, I do. I actually, this is this is my main dude. So this is Nityananda. So this is Nityananda. This is the root guru. So he
Okay.
lived from like the late 1800s to I think he passed in like 1950 something. So I feel like probably the strongest connection there, like especially with meditate. I mean, and my living teacher, of course, too. But when I'm just like sitting and meditating by myself, or in the temple, I sometimes will do a closed eye meditation, and sometimes we'll do open eyed, with a point of focus, which usually is Nityananda, or sometimes I'll work with a specific deity. So Ganesh, Lakshmi, Durga, Kali, those are all deities from the Hindu Kashmir Shaivite tradition. And then there's Tara, Medicine Buddha, Vajrakalaya, Vajra Yogini. Those are the main ones within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that I work with.
Well, I think that about does it. Thank you so much.
Of course. My pleasure.